A step closer to sainthood. On May 22, Pope Leo XIV approved a series of official decrees recognizing the heroic virtues of 3 servants of God, raising them to the title of Venerable, a major milestone on the sacred journey toward sainthood. This solemn declaration from the Vatican not only honors their extraordinary lives but invites the global faithful to reflect on what it means to truly live for Christ. These 3 remarkable individuals, Bishop Alejandro Labaka Ugarte from Spain, Sister Arango Velasquez from Colombia, and Bishop Matthew Makil from India, lived out their faith in radically selfless ways. Their stories span 3 continents and centuries, yet they are united by one calling, to serve the Church and humanity, even unto death. As we journey through their lives, you'll witness what true Christian witness looks like in action. From the dense rainforests of Ecuador to the divided communities of India, these new venerables stood as beacons of peace, compassion, and unwavering conviction. Their testimonies speak urgently to our modern world, calling each of us to deeper faith and fearless love. Let's now walk through their powerful legacies. 1. Venerable Bishop Alejandro Labaka Ugarte, the missionary bishop who gave his life for the indigenous in Ecuador. Origin: born in 1920 in Bezama, Spain, the humble beginnings of Venerable Bishop Alejandro Labaka Ugarte. In the quiet, hilly village of Bezama in the Basque region of northern Spain, a child was born on April 19, 1920, who would one day give his life in the Amazon rainforest for people most of the world had never heard of. Alejandro Labaka Ugarte was born into a deeply Catholic, working-class family rooted in faith, simplicity, and resilience. His birth came just 2 years before the formation of the Second Spanish Republic and only 16 years before civil war would ravage his homeland, a conflict that would play an early and pivotal role in his spiritual awakening. Bezama was not a place of worldly ambitions or grand institutions. It was a farming community where values were passed down through generations, and religious life intertwined with daily toil. In this serene but spiritually rich setting, young Alejandro learned what it meant to live a life of service, sacrifice, and deep faith. But his formative years were soon interrupted by the Spanish Civil War. At just 17 years old, he was conscripted into the war, a harsh and defining experience. Yet, in the chaos and bloodshed, he heard a different call, not to arms, but to peace, healing, and holy mission. By 1937, in the very heart of Spain's upheaval, Alejandro joined the Capuchin Franciscans, drawn by their life of poverty, humility, and radical love. His entrance into the order was not a retreat from the world's suffering, it was a decision to confront it with Christ's mercy. Ordained a priest in 1945, he emerged not just as a man of God, but as one deeply marked by the pain of war and the promise of peace. From his earliest days, his mission was clear: to serve the voiceless, the marginalized, the forgotten. His origins in Bezama were not incidental, they were prophetic. Raised among the quiet hills and deep faith of rural Spain, Alejandro Labaka Ugarte would one day carry the gospel to the remotest jungles of the Amazon, ultimately laying down his life to protect those who had no protector. His story began in Bezama, but it would echo through the world and the Church as a testimony of heroic virtue, missionary zeal, and Christ-like love. Religious life: joined the Capuchin order in 1937, ordained in 1945, took the name Brother Manuel. Born on April 19, 1920, in the small Spanish village of Bezama, Alejandro Labaka Ugarte's path to holiness began in the crucible of war and deep spiritual conviction. At just 17 years old, in the midst of the Spanish Civil War, he was conscripted into military service. However, even in those turbulent times, he felt a deep calling to serve a higher purpose. In 1937, he entered the Order of Friars Minor Capuchin, choosing to dedicate his life fully to God. Upon taking his vows, he embraced the religious name Brother Manuel, a gesture that symbolized his complete surrender to Christ and his mission. His years in formation were marked by discipline, spiritual rigor, and a profound sense of missionary zeal. After 8 years of study, prayer, and preparation, Brother Manuel was ordained to the priesthood in 1945 at the age of 25. He embodied the Franciscan charism of humility, poverty, and service, traits that would define the rest of his life and ministry. Soon after ordination, he eagerly accepted a mission to China in 1947, alongside 3 other Capuchins. It was there that he first encountered the raw complexities of cross-cultural evangelization. However, his mission was short-lived, as the rise of the communist regime led to the expulsion of religious orders, including the Capuchins, by 1953. Brother Manuel's commitment, however, did not waver. Instead of returning to Spain, he accepted a new challenge and was sent to Ecuador. For the next 33 years, Brother Manuel ministered among the indigenous peoples of the Amazon rainforest. His decision to immerse himself in the lives and cultures of the Huaorani and other native groups was born from a deep theological insight that the gospel is already mysteriously present in every culture, the seeds of the word that the Church must discover and nurture. Even after being appointed as the first bishop of the Apostolic Vicariate of Agarico in 1984, he never abandoned his identity as a Capuchin friar. He remained Brother Manuel to all who knew him, humble, approachable, and profoundly dedicated to the marginalized. His deep prayer life and ascetic lifestyle fueled his fearless witness of the gospel, culminating in his ultimate offering of life in 1987, when he died alongside Sister in Arango while trying to protect the Tigeri people from imminent violence. Brother Manuel's religious life was not just a title or a role, it was his entire being. From his Capuchin vows to his final breath, he lived and died as a servant of peace, bridge builder, and loving shepherd to the forgotten. Missionary Journey of Venerable Bishop Alejandro Labaka Ugarte. Venerable Bishop Alejandro Labaka Ugarte's missionary journey began with immense zeal and a heart entirely devoted to the gospel. Born in Bezama, Spain, in 1920, he joined the Capuchin order in 1937 and was ordained a priest in 1945. Driven by a profound missionary spirit, he was sent to China in 1947 with 3 companions. However, their mission was cut short when the Maoist regime expelled all foreign religious personnel by 1953, forcing Labaka and others to leave the country. Redirected by divine providence, Labaka was reassigned to Ecuador, a land where his true missionary calling would unfold. He served in the Amazonian region, primarily among indigenous communities, with a focus on cultural immersion and evangelization. In 1965, he was appointed Apostolic Prefect of Agarico, where he oversaw the spiritual and social well-being of people living in remote, often inaccessible regions of the rainforest. Deeply moved by the vision of Vatican II and particularly its missionary decree Ad Gentes, Labaka emphasized discovering the seeds of the word within indigenous cultures. He resigned as prefect in 1970 to engage more directly with the Huaorani people, living among them and learning their ways in an effort to bring the gospel through mutual respect and enculturation. In 1984, Pope St. John Paul II appointed him Bishop of the Apostolic Vicariate of Agarico. Even in this role, Labaka remained deeply engaged in frontline missionary work, seeking peace between government oil interests and indigenous communities such as the Tigeri and Huaorani. In 1987, when extractive industries threatened the lives of these indigenous groups, Bishop Labaka and Sister in Arango courageously entered hostile territory to prevent bloodshed. Knowing the risks, they descended into the forest by helicopter and were tragically killed by spear and arrow on July 21. Their sacrificial deaths led to the establishment of a protected zone for uncontacted tribes. Labaka's journey, from expulsion in China to martyrdom in Ecuador, stands as a luminous witness of missionary love and heroic charity. Service to the indigenous, Venerable Bishop Alejandro Labaka Ugarte. Venerable Bishop Alejandro Labaka Ugarte, a Capuchin missionary from Spain, dedicated his life to the indigenous peoples of the Ecuadorian Amazon, particularly the Huaorani and Tigeri tribes. Arriving in Ecuador after being expelled from China in the 1950s, he spent over 3 decades ministering to marginalized communities in the rainforest. Inspired by the Second Vatican Council's call to missionary work, Bishop Labaka resigned his post as prefect in 1970 to live more closely among the Huaorani, learning their language, understanding their culture, and sharing the gospel through deep mutual respect. He believed God's presence could be found within their way of life and sought to accompany them spiritually rather than impose external beliefs. In 1984, he was appointed the first bishop of the Apostolic Vicariate of Agarico. From this position, he courageously advocated for indigenous rights, particularly as oil companies began to encroach upon ancestral territories. He became a staunch defender of the Tigeri, one of the last uncontacted tribes, speaking out against the violence and displacement caused by extractive industries. When threats to their survival became imminent due to military and mercenary activity protecting oil interests, Bishop Labaka and Sister Inza Arango took a daring step. Despite the clear danger, they entered the Tigeri territory in July 1987, hoping to prevent a massacre. Tragically, both were killed by the very people they sought to protect. Their death sparked a turning point in Ecuador's environmental and indigenous policy. The government halted oil exploration in the area and later established the Tigeri-Toromonane Intangible Zone in 1999, safeguarding indigenous lands from further exploitation. Bishop Labaka's martyr-like sacrifice exemplifies his unwavering commitment to justice, dignity, and the Gospel's call to love, even unto death. Martyrdom of Venerable Bishop Alejandro Labaka Ugarte. Speared to death in the Ecuadorian rainforest on July 21, 1987, alongside Sister Inza Arango Velázquez, Bishop Alejandro Labaka Ugarte's martyrdom stands as a powerful testament to a life wholly devoted to peace, justice, and the gospel. On that fateful day, the two missionaries attempted peaceful contact with the Tigeri, an uncontacted indigenous group threatened with annihilation as extractive industries pushed into their ancestral lands. The bishop, fully aware of the mortal danger, had declared, "If we don't go there, they will kill them." Bishop Labaka's death was not the result of recklessness, but of self-sacrificial love rooted in a profound sense of mission. He had spent over 3 decades in Ecuador, tirelessly advocating for the dignity and protection of indigenous peoples, especially the Huarani and Tigeri, even mediating between them and oil companies whose operations risked erasing entire communities. His final act, descending from a helicopter into one of the most isolated and dangerous parts of the Amazon, was not a political gesture but an embodiment of Christ's command to lay down one's life for others. His body was later found pierced with spears and arrows, but his legacy endured. His and Sister Inza's death shocked the nation and led to the establishment of the Tigeri-Toromonane Intangible Zone in 1999, a legally protected area safeguarding uncontacted tribes from industrial exploitation. Bishop Labaka is remembered not only for his peaceful nature and unwavering commitment to his mission, but also for his willingness to offer his life for the most vulnerable. His martyrdom, now formally recognized by the Vatican as an offering of life, brings him one step closer to beatification, a recognition not only of his heroic virtue but of the profound impact of his sacrifice on both the Church and the world. 2. Venerable Sister Inza Arango Velázquez, the Colombian nun who died a martyr in Ecuador. Origin: born in 1937 in Medellín, Colombia. Venerable Sister Inza Arango Velázquez was born on April 6, 1937, in Medellín, the vibrant cultural and spiritual heart of Colombia. At the time of her birth, Medellín was a city undergoing great social and industrial transformation. Against this backdrop of change, Inza Arango came into the world as the third of 6 children in a deeply religious Catholic family. Raised in a household that valued prayer, charity, and education, she was imbued from childhood with a strong sense of faith and compassion that would define her life's mission. Medellín, known as the City of Eternal Spring, was not only a bustling urban center but also a city with a deep Catholic heritage. This religious atmosphere greatly influenced Inza's early development. From a young age, she showed signs of a profound spiritual inclination, often participating in parish life and finding joy in acts of service. Her early exposure to the teachings of the Church and the stories of Colombian saints such as Laura Montoya sparked a lifelong desire to serve marginalized and indigenous communities. Inza received her early education in Medellín, where she excelled in academics and was known for her kindness and humility. After completing her formal studies, she devoted 2 decades of her life to teaching, shaping young minds with not only knowledge but also moral values rooted in her Christian faith. It was during this period that her call to missionary life became undeniable. Deeply moved by the Gospel's message of service to the poor and vulnerable, she discerned a vocation to religious life and ultimately joined the Capuchin Tertiary Sisters of the Holy Family. Her Medellín roots, especially her formation in faith and service, laid the foundation for her courageous decision to leave behind the comforts of her native Colombia and venture into the remote and perilous Amazonian missions of Ecuador. There, she would later offer her life in loving service to the indigenous Huarani people, a legacy that began with the spiritual richness of her birthplace. Religious life entered the Capuchin Tertiary Sisters of the Holy Family in 1955. In 1955, Arango Velázquez responded with unwavering faith to a profound call to religious life by joining the Capuchin Tertiary Sisters of the Holy Family, a congregation devoted to humility, simplicity, and missionary service. At just 18 years old, she embraced a life marked by prayer, community, and tireless commitment to the most marginalized. Upon entering the congregation, she took the religious name Maria Nieves de Medellín, reflecting her deep spiritual connection to her birthplace and her devotion to living the gospel in service to others. Her formation within the Capuchin Tertiary Sisters immersed her in the Franciscan spirit of poverty and love for creation, preparing her for a life of self-sacrificing service. The congregation, founded to carry Christ's love to the poor and vulnerable, shaped Sister Ins into a woman of profound compassion, resilient faith, and quiet strength. As a Capuchin sister, she committed herself to the daily rhythm of community prayer, contemplation, and apostolic work, fully dedicating her talents and heart to God's mission. For 2 decades, Sister Ins lived out her religious vows through educational ministry, serving as a school teacher and nurturing both the academic and spiritual growth of children in her care. Her dedication was evident in the depth of her relationships and the transformative effect she had on her students and colleagues. However, she longed for something more radical, a deeper immersion into missionary life, especially among those most forgotten. This longing was fulfilled in 1977, when she accepted the call to serve in the Amazon region of Ecuador, under the jurisdiction of the Apostolic Vicariate of Arango. Assigned to the Capuchin mission led by Bishop Alejandro Labaka, Sister Ins brought her rich Franciscan formation and unwavering spirit to some of the most remote indigenous communities in the world. Her entry into religious life in 1955 was the cornerstone of a journey that would ultimately culminate in her heroic offering of life alongside Bishop Labaka in 1987, an offering that continues to inspire the Universal Church. Missionary work of Venerable Sister Ins Arango Velázquez. Venerable Sister Ins Arango Velázquez dedicated her life to missionary service with profound humility, courage, and an unwavering commitment to marginalized indigenous communities. Born in Medellín, Colombia, in 1937, she joined the congregation of the Capuchin Tertiary Sisters of the Holy Family, embracing a religious life centered on self-sacrifice and evangelical zeal. In 1977, Sister Ins joined the first mission to the Apostolic Vicariate of Arango in Ecuador, a remote and challenging region deep within the Amazon rainforest. There, under the pastoral leadership of Bishop Alejandro Labaka, she evangelized among indigenous peoples, notably the Huarani communities, who lived in isolation and were vulnerable to external threats, including the encroachment of oil companies. Her missionary work was characterized by a humble and patient approach, reflecting a deep respect for indigenous cultures and a passionate desire to share the gospel without imposing or disrupting. Sister Ins was known among the communities for her sincere dedication, kindness, and willingness to face dangers alongside those she served. Despite the inherent risks, Sister Ins persisted in her mission, living and working in difficult conditions, often without basic comforts. She contributed to healthcare efforts by working in hospitals serving the local population, and she tirelessly engaged in pastoral care, education, and spiritual support. In 1987, when tensions escalated due to increasing incursions into indigenous territories by oil companies, Sister Ins, alongside Bishop Labaka, took the courageous step of personally entering the territory of the isolated Tigari people, a subgroup of the Huarani. Their aim was to establish peaceful contact and protect these communities from violent confrontations with mercenaries and extractive industries. Tragically, both Sister Ins and Bishop Labaka were killed by the Tigari, who misunderstood their intentions. Their deaths, however, were not in vain. The sacrifice of Sister Ins and her companion led to the Ecuadorian government halting extractive operations in the region, culminating in the establishment of a protected intangible zone to safeguard the indigenous peoples and their ancestral lands. Sister Ins Arango is remembered not only for her heroic virtue and total offering of life but also for embodying the missionary spirit of humility, courage, and profound love for the marginalized. Her beatification process recognizes her exemplary witness of faith and dedication to those often forgotten by society. Her legacy continues to inspire missionaries and all those called to serve with compassion and courage in the most challenging contexts. Martyrdom of Venerable Sister Ins Arango Velázquez. On July 21, 1987, Sister Ins Arango Velázquez, a Colombian Capuchin missionary and consecrated religious of the Capuchin Tertiary Sisters of the Holy Family, sealed her earthly mission with a profound act of sacrificial love. She was killed alongside Bishop Alejandro Labaka in the Ecuadorian Amazon, during a courageous and selfless attempt to establish peaceful contact with the isolated and vulnerable Tigari people, an uncontacted subgroup of the Huarani. Sister Ins, deeply moved by the gospel mandate to go to the peripheries, accompanied Bishop Labaka into a territory few dared to enter. Their mission was clear: to prevent the violent extermination of the Tigari by mercenaries protecting oil industry interests. Unarmed, peaceful, and fueled by the desire to protect lives and uphold the dignity of indigenous communities, Sister Ins voluntarily joined the bishop on a perilous helicopter descent into the rainforest, fully aware of the imminent danger. Their aim was not only to reach the Tigari but to bear Christian witness through nonviolence, dialogue, and solidarity. Her martyrdom was not sudden or impulsive, it was deeply rooted in her discerned vocation. Her final letters, written before their fateful journey, reveal her clear awareness of the risks involved and her complete surrender to God's will. She wrote of her readiness to give her life for the mission, expressing both serenity and resolve in the face of mortal peril. For Sister Ins, martyrdom was not an accident, but a conscious and loving offering, what the Church now formally recognizes as an offering of life, a path to beatification outlined in the Apostolic Letter Maiorum Hac Dilectionem. The missionaries' bodies were found pierced with spears and arrows, clear evidence of the violence they sought to interrupt. But their deaths bore fruit. Their sacrifice catalyzed government action to halt extractive activity in the area and led to the creation of the Tigari Toromonane Intangible Zone, safeguarding uncontacted tribes from further incursions. Today, the Church acknowledges Sister Ins's death not merely as tragic, but as a testimony to heroic charity. Her martyrdom stands as a beacon for missionaries and lay faithful alike, demonstrating that true discipleship often leads to the cross. The Vatican's recent declaration of her as Venerable confirms that her life, witness, and death radiate the holiness of one who lived out the gospel with complete devotion and courage. 3. Venerable Bishop Matthew Makil, the peacemaker Bishop of India and founder of a religious congregation. Origin: born in 1851 in Manju, India, into a well-off Christian family. Venerable Bishop Matthew Makil was born on March 27, 1851, in the village of Manjur, nestled in the scenic state of Kerala, India. His birth into a prosperous and devout Christian family of the Syro-Malabar Church provided him a firm foundation of both spiritual depth and material stability, a rare combination in mid-19th century India, which was still under British colonial rule and marked by stark religious and economic divides. The socio-religious atmosphere of Kerala at the time was shaped by a deep-rooted Christian presence, particularly among the St. Thomas Christians, whose lineage traced back to the apostolic missionary journeys of St. Thomas the Apostle. Matthew's family belonged to this rich spiritual heritage, and their affluence afforded young Matthew access to quality education and early religious instruction. Unlike many of his contemporaries who were hindered by poverty or caste-related barriers, Matthew grew up in an environment that encouraged academic pursuit, moral responsibility, and a devotion to church life. The nurturing he received at home, where faith and generosity were daily lived values, instilled in him a deep sense of purpose and a calling to serve others. At a time when most Indian Christians were still grappling with the aftershocks of colonial influence on local ecclesial traditions, Matthew Makil's upbringing in Manjur stood out as uniquely balanced. His family was not only financially stable but also culturally active in the church, blending traditional Indian values with a deep respect for Catholic doctrine. This fusion of identity, Indian by birth and Catholic by faith, would later become a defining aspect of Bishop Makil's spiritual leadership. Growing up in such a devout household meant that Matthew was likely introduced early on to the liturgical richness of the Syro-Malabar Rite, known for its reverent use of Syriac traditions and East Syrian liturgical forms. This heritage left a profound impact on his religious imagination and fueled his desire to safeguard and uplift his community's ecclesiastical identity, a vision he would champion later as bishop. The intellectual and moral resources available to him in childhood paved the way for his entry into seminary, where he quickly distinguished himself by his piety, humility, and keen theological mind. But long before he donned the clerical robe, the seeds of heroic virtue were being quietly sown in the peaceful surroundings of Manjur. It was here, in the heart of a God-fearing household, that Matthew Makil first encountered the truths of the gospel, not merely as theological abstractions, but as living principles embodied by his family and community. This spiritually rich and materially comfortable origin gave Bishop Makil the grounding to later become the first native apostolic vicar of Kottayam and the founder of the Congregation of the Sisters of the Visitation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. His early years in Manjur were not just formative, they were prophetic, foreshadowing a life of selfless leadership, theological clarity, and unwavering commitment to the Syro-Malabar Catholic Church. The Church's May 22, 2025, declaration of his heroic virtues now stands as a powerful affirmation of a life that began humbly in Manjur but has since become an enduring light in the global Catholic communion. Religious life of Venerable Bishop Matthew Makil. Born on March 27, 1851, in Manjur, Kerala, Venerable Bishop Matthew Makil embraced a profound and unwavering commitment to the Catholic faith from an early age. This deep spiritual devotion set him on a path toward religious life, culminating in his ordination to the priesthood in 1865. At just 14 years old, Matthew Makil entered the seminary, a testament to his early maturity, extraordinary piety, and the divine calling he sensed with clarity and conviction. His ordination marked the beginning of a remarkable ecclesiastical journey dedicated to pastoral care, community formation, and religious leadership in the Syro-Malabar Catholic Church. As a young priest, Fr. Makil served diligently in various pastoral roles, known for his humility, spiritual wisdom, and ability to connect with the faithful. His priestly ministry was marked by tireless work in evangelization, catechesis, and education. He was instrumental in nurturing a vibrant Catholic identity among the faithful in Kerala, especially at a time when the Eastern Catholic communities were striving to affirm their liturgical and ecclesiastical distinctiveness. His aptitude for leadership and his sensitivity to the pastoral needs of his people soon caught the attention of the church hierarchy. In 1889, recognizing his deep spiritual insight and administrative capabilities, Bishop Matthew Makil was appointed Vicar General of the Vicariate of Kottayam, a pivotal moment that set the course for his future elevation within the church. As Vicar General, he was entrusted with overseeing the clergy, coordinating diocesan activities, and ensuring the spiritual welfare of the Syro-Malabar faithful under his jurisdiction. His appointment was not merely administrative, it was a profound recognition of his leadership among the Eastern Catholic communities, particularly the Southeast, Nanaya Catholics who often struggled for pastoral representation and recognition within the broader church. As Vicar General, Makil fostered a culture of religious discipline and renewal. He advocated for the spiritual formation of the clergy, promoted Catholic education, and emphasized the importance of catechetical instruction for children and adults alike. His vision extended to the strengthening of pious associations and religious congregations, laying the groundwork for more structured and spiritually enriching communities. He became a bridge between tradition and pastoral innovation, guiding his flock with both fidelity to the Church's magisterium and sensitivity to local needs. Bishop Makil's tenure as Vicar General was marked by grace, foresight, and courage. He championed the unique identity of the Nanaya community while remaining deeply united with the Universal Church. This period of his life, marked by administrative stewardship and spiritual leadership, would soon lead to his historic appointment in 1911 as the first Vicar Apostolic of the newly established Vicariate of Kottayam, a position that affirmed the Vatican's confidence in his integrity and the necessity of his mission. His legacy as a priest and Vicar General is not only remembered for the offices he held but for the servant leadership, pastoral zeal, and visionary reforms he brought to the Syro-Malabar Church. Now declared venerable by Pope Leo XIV in 2025, the Church recognizes that his religious life was lived with heroic virtue, rooted in obedience, love of God, and service to his people. Pastoral achievements of Venerable Bishop Matthew Makil. Venerable Bishop Matthew Makil's pastoral legacy is one of visionary leadership rooted in compassion, spiritual depth, and a firm commitment to the spiritual and educational advancement of the faithful. His most enduring pastoral achievement was the founding of the Sisters of the Visitation of the Blessed Virgin Mary in 1892, a religious congregation dedicated primarily to the education and moral formation of girls. At a time when women's education was both limited and undervalued in many parts of India, Bishop Makil recognized the transformative power of education in uplifting communities, especially among the marginalized. Through this congregation, he ensured that thousands of young girls could access formal education grounded in Catholic values, laying a foundation for a more just and spiritually nourished society. Bishop Makil was also a vigorous promoter of catechesis and religious instruction, believing firmly in the role of sound doctrinal teaching in nurturing a strong faith community. He spearheaded efforts to standardize catechetical materials and train lay catechists, making the teachings of the Church more accessible to ordinary believers, particularly in rural areas. His emphasis on religious education extended to the establishment and support of Catholic schools, where secular subjects were taught in harmony with Christian moral and ethical values. In addition to his work in education, Bishop Makil was deeply committed to fostering vocations and establishing religious organizations that would strengthen the life of the Church in India. He encouraged young men and women to pursue religious life, not merely as a career path, but as a divine calling to serve God and His people. Under his guidance, numerous religious initiatives, confraternities, and pious associations were formed to deepen lay participation in the spiritual and social mission of the Church. Above all, Bishop Makil's pastoral achievements reveal a shepherd whose heart was attuned to the needs of his flock, especially the poor, the young, and the uneducated. His holistic vision for the Church integrated spiritual formation, education, and community building, marking him as a pioneering leader whose contributions continue to shape the Syro-Malabar Church today. Champion of Unity, Venerable Bishop Matthew Makil. Venerable Bishop Matthew Makil, recently declared venerable by Pope Leo XIV on May 22, 2025, exemplified profound unity and pastoral prudence during one of the most volatile times in the Syro-Malabar Catholic Church. Born in 1851 in Manju, Kerala, Makil rose from humble beginnings to become a guiding light for a deeply divided church. His most enduring legacy lies in his ability to act as a champion of unity, skillfully mediating the deep ethnic and regional divisions that once threatened the Church's integrity. In the early 20th century, tensions had reached a boiling point within the Syro-Malabar Church, especially in the vicariate of Changanachari. These tensions primarily stemmed from a growing rift between the Northerners and Southerners, two major community groups within the Church. The escalating disputes were not merely doctrinal or administrative but also cultural and socio-political, often resulting in deep resentment, fractured parishes, and unrest among the faithful. Bishop Makil recognized that unity could not be achieved by force or suppression but only through justice and reconciliation. He acted as a mediator and peacemaker, engaging both sides with pastoral care and diplomatic insight. Rather than let the conflicts worsen or ignore the grievances of either faction, he proposed a bold and unconventional solution, the division of the vicariate of Changanachari. In a move rooted in wisdom and compassion, Bishop Makil recommended to Rome that the vicariate be split to allow each community the freedom to flourish spiritually and culturally under separate jurisdictions. This was not a division of faith but an administrative restructuring aimed at restoring peace. Rome accepted his recommendation, and in 1911, the Vicariate of Kottayam was created exclusively for the Southerners. Bishop Matthew Makil was appointed as its first apostolic vicar, becoming the spiritual father of a community that had long felt marginalized. Under his leadership, the new vicariate flourished, establishing schools, churches, and religious congregations. His wise leadership brought lasting peace, proving that true unity is not about uniformity, but about respecting diversity within the body of Christ. Even after his death in 1914, Bishop Makil continued to be remembered as a unifier and spiritual statesman. His episcopal motto, Dea Spes Mea, God is my hope, captured the depth of his unwavering faith and tireless service. Now recognized as venerable, his heroic virtues of courage, charity, and justice stand as a timeless model for reconciliation in the face of division. His elevation marks not only a step toward sainthood but also a reminder that peace, when achieved through humility and sacrifice, becomes a lasting legacy. Lives of heroism and holiness. The elevation of these three servants of God, Bishop Alejandro Labaka Ugarte, Sister Arango Velasquez, and Bishop Matthew Makil, to the rank of venerable, is not merely a recognition of individual sanctity, but a powerful affirmation of the enduring relevance of heroic virtue in our modern world. Each of these individuals, in their own context and calling, embodied the Gospel's core message of love, sacrifice, and service to the marginalized. Bishop Labaka and Sister Arango offered their very lives in a bold and selfless act to protect the indigenous peoples of Ecuador. Their decision to risk everything rather than abandon the vulnerable demonstrates an unparalleled commitment to peace, justice, and the sanctity of human life. Their martyr-like offering of life calls us to consider, what are we willing to risk for the sake of others? How far are we willing to go to uphold the dignity of the voiceless? On another continent, Bishop Matthew Makil exemplified a different kind of heroism, one rooted in pastoral leadership, educational reform, and religious formation in India. As the founder of the Sisters of the Visitation of the Blessed Virgin Mary, he laid the foundation for a legacy that continues to influence generations. His efforts to unite communities, strengthen catechesis, and promote harmony remind us that heroism often lies not in dramatic sacrifice, but in consistent, faith-filled service. In today's often divided world, what can we learn from Bishop Makil's dedication to reconciliation and holistic education? By declaring these individuals venerable, Pope Leo XIV invites the global Church to reflect on how ordinary lives, when lived with extraordinary virtue, can become timeless beacons of holiness. Their stories transcend borders and time, stirring in each of us a desire to live more purposefully and courageously. As the Church awaits possible miracles and the next step toward beatification, we are reminded that sanctity is not reserved for the past, it calls out to us today. Questions for reflection. How can I embody heroic virtue in my everyday life? Do I recognize the dignity and needs of those who are marginalized in my community? What steps can I take to foster peace and reconciliation, like Bishop Makil? Would I be willing to stand in defense of others even when it puts me at risk? Let their lives challenge and inspire us. Which of these stories moves you most deeply? In what ways can their examples shape your spiritual journey? Share your thoughts below.